few days ago, we revisited some cool British singles released in November 1967. But so many great singles were released that month, that the video deserved a second part. So here it is. Here are some more cool British singles, from November 1967.
It's a sight to bring you joy, you feel so gay.
For those who are not familiar with the Bonzos, the band could be described as the musical equivalent of Monty Python. Their music combined elements of music hall, trad jazz, psychedelia, and surreal humor.
A few days ago I got right away from this smoke and smog and beastliness of the city and slipped out into the country. It was a wonderful day, but of course I got lost. Normally I wouldn't, but...
Equestrian statue, dancing up and down the square.
Equestrian Statue was both a nod and a parody of the Beatles' most baroque pop-sounding material. And in fact, the band appeared on the Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour film, which was premiered a month later. This wasn't the last time that Bonzo's member Neil Innes would write a Beatles parody song. In the late 70s, he wrote all the Beatles parody songs from the film The Ruttles. The single was well received by the press. Record Mirror wrote,
"Great. Very funny and original, and they're one of the few outfits who can capture on disc some of their astonishing stage presence virtues."
And Neil Innes, piano.
The Flip is a hilarious instrumental in which the MC introduces all the members of the group. The real ones, plus Harold Wilson, Adolf Hitler, and Princess Anne.
And looking very relaxed, Adolf Hitler on vibes. Nice.
I believe my time ain't low.
November 1967 saw the release of Fleetwood Mac's first single. Later in 1968, the press hailed Fleetwood Mac as the leaders of the new British blues boom, and one of the most promising bands in the country. But in November 1967, with psychedelia still at its peak, some reviewers accused the band of being unprogressive. Nick Jones reviewed the single for The Melody Maker, and his review reflected this point of view. The journalist wrote,
Launching Mike Vernon's new Blue Horizon Blues label, comes this impeccable performance from Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, with Elmore James' My Time, also known as Dust My Broom, Dust My Blues, and probably 100 other titles of the same thing. No doubt I'll get bags of aggressive and hairy letters, but I still fail to be moved by this old hat English blues. I'm sure it takes a lot of talent to play any music well. But carbon copies of the blues is no use to me. It's difficult to copy soul anyway. John Mayall began to get away from the ancient blueprint on his Hard Road album, with Peter Green moving progressively and creatively forward on things like Supernatural. But here, we're back on the back of someone else's music. If the Blues Crusaders revel as much as they obviously and understandably do in the music of the blues originators, why do they insist on having to play it as well? Are they not in possession of their own heads?
the single failed to chart. Man in a Shop was the second single by Marmalade. Their first single, a marvelous song called I See the Rain, inexplicably missed the chart. And this one suffered the same fate, despite also being an excellent song. Journalist Chris Welch reviewed the single for The Melody Maker. Welch wrote,
"Put a small star beside this one. Great vocal harmonies in a Beatles Hollies groove, following the backward tape intro. The slow beat is reminiscent of Like a Rolling Stone. And after their recent success on the Who Traffic Tour, Marmalade could well spread themselves all over the chart. Or did I say this about their last record? Great anyway."
After the success of Death of a Clown, Dave Davies released his second single in November. Just like Death of a Clown, the song featured the Kinks as his backing band, but the group decided to release the song as a Dave Davies solo single. The single got great reviews in the press. The Melody Maker wrote,
"This strikes me as a much more likely hit than did Death of a Clown when I first played it. It's an excellent pop record, well produced and very commercial. It's the tale of an unwanted lady who finds solace in hard liquor. It's given a spirited rip-roaring treatment by Dave Davies, who sings in dual track throughout. And he's supported by a sensational kinky backing. It's action-packed and electrifying. The beat is supercharged. And the sound is so full and solid that you could cut it with a knife. On top of all that, there's a catchy riff melody that you'll soon all be singing.
Despite the good reviews, the single wasn't as successful as Death of a Clown. It stalled at number 20. This excellent single by the Society was produced by the Hollies lead singer Alan Clark, which probably explains why it got widely reviewed in the press, and got more attention than most other debut singles released that month. The song was actually very reminiscent of the sort of material the Hollies themselves were recording at the time. Record Mirror wrote,
The Society reached records via Holly Alan Clark, who caught their act in Glasgow earlier this year and immediately decided to record them. Derham, the lucky label that releases this full of promise group, are pleased to have the track that Alan produced. There are 4 members of the Society and they've been together since July 1966. They write good songs, perform them even better, and on the basis of this first release, it looks like they have a bright future.
The single was a commercial failure, and the label never bothered to release another single by the group.
5 long years you still ain't done me right now. Taste and try for you vibe.
Like Fleetwood Mac, Savoy Brown were another band that was part of the so-called British blues boom of the late 60s. Even though plenty of psychedelic singles and albums were still being released in 1968, psychedelia started to lose momentum, and many blues-based bands seemed to take over, eventually paving the way for the blues-based hard rock bands of the late 60s and early 70s. The single got pretty positive reviews in the press.
A throaty vocalist, Blues shouts his way through this sizzling number with a suitably raucous twangy backing. Not much tune, but it has a down-to-earth genuine feel.
The single failed to chart. Brian Auger and the Trinity featuring Julie Driscoll released their debut single in November 1967. Brian and Julie, along with Rod Stewart, had been playing under the name Steam Packet for a couple of years without much success. Brian Auger was considered to be one of the best organ players in Britain. But the lack of interest in this single seemed to indicate that the group would suffer the same fate as Steam Packet. However, everything changed when they released their second single in April 1968. Their cover of This Wheel's on Fire by Bob Dylan became their biggest hit, and one of the biggest British hits of 1968. Many singles released in 1967 actually featured better B-sides than A-sides. This is another one of those singles. Happy Land, the top side, wasn't a bad song at all. But the B-side, Reason to Live, was a beautiful psychedelic pop song, with great harmonies and a gorgeous melody. By the time the single was released, Skip Biffa had already recorded a full-length album. But unfortunately, their record label, RCA, decided to hold back the album's release. The label's plan was to wait until the band had a smash hit before releasing the record. However, this smash hit never arrived, and by the time the album was released, the band had lost their momentum. After the release of the band's third single in 1968, a management dispute with Don Arden eventually led to the demise of the band.
If I've ever exploited anybody, it's for their own benefit. It's because they want to be exploited. I never exploit anybody who doesn't want to be exploited.
And last but not least, here's a rather mysterious single. Mysterious because it's virtually impossible to find any info on the band. The song sounded like a blend of British psychedelia and the sunshine pop material that was coming out of the States at the time. The only mention the band ever got in the press was this tiny review from Record Mirror. Record Mirror wrote,
This two-sider is another worthy one to watch. Could have chances for the way it sustains interest. A mid-tempo and philosophic beat ballad. Nice changes of mood.
The single was badly promoted, and of course, it never charted. But if you ever come across this single in a record store, you should definitely buy it. I hope you enjoyed this second part of Cool British Singles from November 1967. See you next time.